In this video, we'll be going over Form SSA 8, the application for a lump sum death payment. So this is the payment that beneficiaries may be entitled to, a one-time lump sum payment of $255. Generally speaking, that's not a whole lot of money, but for some people, every little bit helps. So in order to claim that lump sum death payment, you have to meet certain criteria, and you also have to complete Form SSA 8. So we'll go through this form step by step, and then at the end of the form, we'll go through some of the considerations in filing with the Social Security Administration. So we're on page 1, and we're redoing this video. It was done in 2023, and then later on that year, the Social Security Administration pulled up or published an updated version of this form with a couple of minor changes. So thank you. This was actually pointed out to me by one of our subscribers, so thank you very much. And let's go ahead and get into this form. So you can pull down this form at the Social Security website. You can also probably fill it out in person if you set up an appointment with the office. So on item 1, you'll put your name, whoever you are as the claimant, whether you're the surviving spouse, whether you're the executor of the estate. So you would put your name, first name, middle initial, and last name in item 1. In item 2, you would print the name of the deceased wage earner. So in this case, Mary J. Doe is filing an application. Her husband is the decedent, John Doe. And then in item 2B, enter the decedent's Social Security number. In item 3, we'll enter the date of birth for the deceased person. So in this case, John Doe, his date of birth was January 1st, 1970, and he passed away on June 30th, in 2024 at his hometown in Texas. So in item 5, you would only answer this question if the deceased worked within the past 2 years. So if they were retired, you would skip this and go on to item 6. So in this case, John Doe, in item 5A, we're talking about the year of his death. So he earned, let's say, $60,000, even though he died halfway through the year. In the prior year, he earned $70,000. Let's just say that he was on track for a big pay raise, or most of his income came earlier in the year. So, but in this case, the Social Security Administration wants to know what they earned in the year that they died, and then what they earned in the year before their death. In item 6, you're going to only answer it if the deceased died prior to age 66 and if they died within the past 4 months. So in this case, I mean, technically we're in December, so let's make this kind of a more plausible scenario. There we go. Now he's clearly died within the past 4 months, and from his date of birth, seeing that we're in tax year 2024, we can clearly see that he's under the age of 66. So this is basically a disability question. Was he unable to work because of some sort of illness, injuries, or conditions at the time of death? If so, you would check yes, and then enter the date that they became unable to work. So the month, day, and year. In this case, John Doe is working all the way up until his death. So we'll check no and go on to item 7. In item 7A, you're going to answer whether or not this person, the deceased, was in the active duty, either on the military or the naval service, after September 7th, 1939 and before 1968. So We checked yes. Technically, we would check no because he was born in 1970, so obviously he wasn't. But if you did check yes, you would enter the dates of service. So you can see here this example really doesn't make sense because the question is asking whether or not they were on active duty before 1968. So, I'm just filling in these blanks so you can visualize the answer. Generally speaking, this is probably for, at this point, people that are in their 70s or later on or later. And then in item 7C, has anyone to include the deceased received or expect to receive any benefits from another federal agency? So whether it would be retirement benefits, disability. Again, if you checked no up here, you're not answering this question at all, so you don't need to answer it. But if you did check yes, you would just go through appropriately. In item 8, you would answer whether or not they worked in the railroad industry specifically, because the railroad industry has similar but uniquely different benefit program from the Social Security program. So if you're applying for Social Security benefits, they're very similar to what's known as the RRTA benefits. You pay into them in a very similar manner, but the Social Security Administration does need to know whether or not you did that and paid into that system. So in this case, no, he did not. We'll go on to item 9. So did they ever engage in work that was covered under a Social Security system from a country outside the United States? Most people would select no and go on to item 10, but if you selected yes, you would list the country or countries in question. So in this case, we just put in Canada and France. Item 10 has 3 sections, Section A, Section C, B, and Section C. So, and they all look very similar, but they ask unique questions. So in item 10A, is the deceased survived by a spouse? So we're going to end it. So yes, because his spouse is actually completing the form. So if you're the surviving spouse, you're going to complete yes in item 10A. And then you would enter your name. So her maiden name was Mary Jane Smith, when they got married, where they got married. If the marriage was still going, you don't need to put an end to it. So you can put, you can leave that blank. Or you can put, John Doe's death if you want. I don't see why you would need to do that. It's pretty apparent that if the person is the surviving spouse, you can put. And then you can put the date of death. And then you would enter this extra information: marriage performed by a public official or a clergyman, the spouse's date of birth, and then the spouse's social security number. So, and a lot of this seems like extra detail, but the Social Security Administration does take a lot of this into consideration when it comes to calculating benefits. Not just the $255 lump sum payment, but survivor benefits. So we are going to go on to items B and C, because item B includes any prior marriages that were at least 10 years long. So in this case, we put down Elizabeth Smith, who happens to be Mary Jane Smith's sister, was John Doe's first wife. They got married back in 2000. And of course, we ended the marriage, before we should have, because it says at least 10 years. Let's just say that it ended in 2010 and we made a mistake up here. They were actually not married until the following year in 2011. So this now meets the criteria of a marriage that lasted 10 years. They were up in Chicago. They got married. They got divorced exactly 10 years apart. And this marriage was performed by a clergyman, spouse's date of birth, And then if the spouse is deceased, you would enter their date of death. In item 10C, this would be if the decedent had surviving children, or as outlined below, because this is where we're going to put the surviving children information, and the deceased was married to the child's mother or father, but that marriage ended in divorce, then you would enter in this information here. So we can't use Elizabeth Smith because it specifically says if it's not already listed in item 10B. But let's imagine that Elizabeth Smith's marriage only lasted 2 years, like we originally said, and we didn't put that information up here. You would put the information in item 10C instead, because if a surviving ex-spouse has dependent children, and they have to meet the dependent children criteria in item 11, which we'll get to. But if they still have dependent children, they may be eligible for Social Security benefits from their ex-spouse's work history. So, for an example, a couple years ago, a really good friend of mine passed away, and he had children from a former wife that they had equal custody, but the former wife was able to claim benefits for the children because they were under 18 at the time that he passed away. So she was able to claim those benefits on behalf of the children, and then her information would have been listed here when this SSA 8 form was completed. In item 11, we're going to list eligible surviving children. So eligible surviving children include natural children, adopted children, stepchildren. They also include any dependent grandchildren, dependents of the decedent. So they have to have a dependent relationship with the person that passed away. So the grandchildren could be step-grandchildren. They have to meet the criteria outlined here. So they must be unmarried and not married for the previous 12 months. They also have to be either under 18 or age 18 and 19 still in high school, basically, full-time, or 18 and older, but with a disability that began before the age of 22. So if there are no children that meet that criteria, then enter none. In this case, there are 2 children, Elizabeth Doe and John Doe Jr. So in item 12, we're going to enter information about whether or not there were surviving parents that were receiving support from the decedent. So if you answer yes, you would enter the name and the address of the parents in the remarks section down below here. Item 14, if there's a surviving spouse, then you would consider answering item 14. But if you're not the surviving spouse, you would enter the surviving spouse's information. So this could be, maybe an adult child that is completing the paperwork because the surviving spouse is not able to do it. Maybe the child has power of attorney. So you would write the surviving spouse's name and address in line 14. If there's no surviving spouse, then you would skip items 14 through 17, and then you just go on to the remarks and signature section. In item 15, you'll answer whether or not the deceased and the surviving spouse were living together at the same address when the deceased died. So they're either co-located or they're not. So in this case, yes, you would just move on to item 16. If they weren't living at the same address, then you would answer whether or not one of them was away from home, who was away, the date that they were last at home, why they separated, the reason they were apart. If they were separated because of an illness, then you would enter the nature of the illness or disabling condition. So you would complete this section if you were separated. You would complete this section if one spouse was enrolled in like an adult living facility, like a nursing home type situation, you would enter that information, and it would seem very similar, but the Social Security Administration does take additional consideration when calculating benefits based on whether you're separated and kind of actually on your way to divorce versus whether or not there's a medical necessity like a hospitalization that forced the spouses to part ways. In line 16, if you're the surviving spouse and you're under the age of 66, then you would answer this one. So either yes or no, are you currently disabled and unable to work? Or was there any period in the last 14 months where you were disabled and unable to work? If yes, you would enter the month, day, and year that you became disabled. If no, then you check no and just go to item 17. So item 17 is for the surviving spouse, and it's a very similar question to item 10B, where you're talking about a prior marriage that lasted at least 10 years. So if Elizabeth Doe was previously married and her prior marriage lasted 10 years or longer, then she would complete this section in an identical manner as in item 10B. So basically, spouse's name, when, where, how the marriage ended, when, where, who performed the marriage, date of birth, stuff like that. So again, this is for consideration for the Social Security Administration because they'll take this information if the surviving spouse is going to apply for survivor's benefits. Down the road, the surviving spouse might be entitled to Social Security benefits based on his or her own earnings record, could be the deceased taxpayer's earnings record, or it could be a prior spouse, an ex-spouse earning record. And and nowadays, after some Social Security reforms from a few years ago, when you apply for any survivor benefits, you have to apply for benefits under your own record, as well as the survivor benefits, and then the Social Security Administration will give you the higher of the two, but not both. And there used to be Social Security strategies such as like a suspended application or file and suspend, where you could technically file but then suspend your application to receive spousal benefits, and then when you reached a certain age, then you could flip the switch to claim your own benefits. But for most taxpayers, that window of opportunity has lapsed. So under remarks, if there are any explanations, like please explain in the remarks section. If you need more space, use the remarks section. Any additional information that you're either required to submit or that you want the Social Security Administration to consider, you would enter that information here. And then you would sign as the applicant, sign date, and then enter a contact phone number, as well as your mailing address, city and state, zip code, name of the county, and then direct deposit information. So you don't have to enter direct deposit. You can click direct deposit refused, but most people would have direct deposit information so that they, there's one less check floating around in the mail. EFT transfers are generally faster, more secure for beneficiaries. And the Social Security Administration is probably one of the few organizations that I've seen that still accepts a mark, which is an X, as a legal signature. So if you're not able to sign your name, you can write an X here, but then you would need the signature of two witnesses that personally know you to sign and then enter their address here, basically verifying your identity. And then you could still do that. So, and then make sure that you're writing in ink. You can type out the rest of this form just like I have here, but when you sign the form, it must be in ink. Now, generally speaking, the Social Security Administration says that you should file this application in person. And in my experience as a financial planner, if you set up an appointment with the local office, you get to take more time. You won't have to wait in the office. You just wait for your appointment time. And then once you're there, you have the opportunity to ask pertinent questions about other benefits. I feel like most people should do that unless you are 100% sure that you know everything about your Social Security situation, because on the other side of that desk is someone that probably knows much more about how this process works than you. And even if they don't, they can pull up a lot more information than you have access to in your records. So it's always a good, I would call it a best practice to set up the appointment in person to complete the paperwork. So you should expect a receipt. You may get it from the office. Generally speaking, you're probably going to get that in the mail, but the receipt should have a phone number to call if you have a question or something to report. It should be the name of the Social Security office that's processing, the date that the claim was received. You should see some sort of a control number here and your claimant information. And then you should also have an estimate of how many days it'll take for the SSA to process your information. On the rest of the back of the form, there's a Privacy Act statement as well as the Paperwork Reduction Act statement. According to the Paperwork Reduction Act, it should take about 10 minutes to complete this form, which is probably less time than I spent doing this video. But it is important. The last time I produced this video, lots of people have engaged with it. So wanted to give you the best and most up-to-date information on this. So additionally, we also updated the associated article, which you can find at our website. If you go to teachmepersonalfinance.com, type in form SSA 8, you'll see the article appear. We'll also put a link in the show notes so that you can go right to the article. So if you like our articles, please subscribe to our newsletter. And if you like our YouTube videos, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. And as always, if you have any questions or comments, or if there's another topic that you'd like to see discussed in an upcoming video, please hit me up in the comments section. Thank you very much and have a great day.